Hey guys, Lucas from iExplore here. Today we're hanging out in Shibuya, and I want to tell you guys about why I love the Nikon Z9. There's a couple of reasons I want to talk about. But first, please consider supporting us on Patreon. It really helps us out. If you like this kind of content, if you can give us a buck on there, that's a big plus. We're very, very grateful for that. Anyway, let's get on to the 7 reasons why I love the Nikon Z9.
iExplore.
All right, guys, so I try to rank these things I love about the Z9 sort of in order of importance to me, but maybe it's not gonna be perfect, but I'd say that the number one thing, the first most important thing, is the EVF. And although it is a great EVF, it's crystal clear, it's, has great dynamic range. I haven't compared it like with the Z6, is it better? I'm assuming it's better, it's just good. But what the main thing is just how responsive it is. That's where it really totally beats the Z6 for me and the Z7. Because when I pick up a Z6 or Z7 and put it to my eye, there is a perceptible lag between your eye getting detected by the proximity sensor and the screen actually turning on. It's very short, it's not very long, but sometimes it caused me to miss a shot. And on this one, this camera, it's instant. You bring it up and it's there. The other thing is, even if that's not fast enough, because of course there must be some slight lag, a microsecond lag. The other nice thing is if I tap the shutter button halfway, as I bring up the camera, the EVF will be already on. And this is something that the Z6 didn't do. Maybe that's a setting I didn't know how to set, but tapping the shutter button would not turn on the EVF. It would wake up the camera, but it would not turn on the EVF until it actually detected my eye there. And that was very frustrating at times. Besides that, this is a very high refresh rate EVF. I don't know if it's more or less than the Z6. I could look that up and put it in a note. But you do need to enable the 120 Hertz refresh rate by going into the custom settings menu, the shootings and display, and then it's option D20. It's like high frequency EVF or something. I'll probably put a note explaining that. So make sure you turn that on. That gives you the faster frame rates or the refresh rates in the EVF at the expense of some battery. But I find the effect on battery was negligible, but the impact on my shooting experience was very big. All right, so love the EVF. So the second thing I love about the Z9, and it honestly could have been number one, it's a very close second, just as important as the EVF, and that is the 3D tracking autofocus, which is back finally. Something that has been a mainstay of all the SLRs. My D4 had a D5, even non-pro SLRs, like a D7000 or whatever, they all had this feature. And then on the Z6, Z7, they changed it, they called it subject tracking, and it worked a little bit differently. And I didn't like it, and it wasn't bad. I mean, it was okay, but I'm so happy to have 3D tracking back. And what is the main difference? Of course, the 3D tracking focus, I think Nikon didn't want to use that branding because it's the premier, it's the best, and I think the one in the Z6, Z7 maybe wasn't up to the standard they were hoping for. But that didn't bother me. It didn't bother me that it wasn't the best tracking focus ever. To me, it was very good. What really annoyed me is how you access it. It wasn't its own discrete setting. You had to go to like wide area AF or something, and then you had to press OK on the back of the camera. And you could map it to these front buttons too, sure. But the fact that you had to press an additional button to get to this setting every time you wanted to use it, to me was just honestly idiotic. It just made such a waste of time. And sometimes I would be already in it, but I would instinctually press the button so I would get out of it. Honestly, it's just dumb. It was just dumb. I don't get why they did it. Maybe there's some reason, who knows. Point is, this is gone. It's now just like it was on my D4 that I'm used to. It's a discrete setting. You put the camera on AFC, and then the sub option is 3D tracking, and you're just in it. And then you use the center point, or you could put the point wherever you want to track. I also use the back button, I've been doing that for years. I point at what I want to shoot, I track, I move it around, or the subject moves around, it tracks it wonderfully, and I love that. And then on top of that, the tracking is actually amazing. Like, it tracks faces, animals, cars and bikes and stuff beautifully. Even random other objects, it tracks extremely well. It does it very well in low light. It's a little slower in low light, but that's of course understandable to lock on, but still it does it. I mean, it's just awesome. It's the best subject tracking I've ever used in any camera. And of course I can access it immediately. It can just be the setting that is always set. So I can just use it 99% of the time like I did on my D4 for years. So awesome. All right, so the third reason that I love the Z9 is the purely electronic shutter with no blackout and totally silent. Now, when I first heard about this, I was actually first of all, a little skeptical that this might cause issues with like shooting in fluorescent lighting or LED lighting. And secondly, I just thought like, yeah, whatever, I'm not gonna care about this. It's cool that it's there, but whatever. But having used the camera for a couple of weeks now, shot quite a lot of things with it, even a couple of jobs, I realized this is awesome. First of all, having no blackout is extremely useful. Of course, it's really meant for things like wildlife and sports, things that are moving fast, and I'm just doing like street photography and events for my work sometimes. But even there, it's useful. It's just nice not to have anything between you and the scene. That's the first thing. Second thing is the fact that it's silent. For my events especially, very, very useful. It's even useful on the streets because people, of course, don't notice you as much. It's a little more discreet. But just the fact that it's silent for event jobs is really important. I did a couple jobs last year where I was forced to use the silent shutter on my Z7 at the time, and that silent shutter is not quite as good as this one. The E shutter reads out the sensor data a little more slowly, or I don't know the technical reasons exactly, but it would cause sometimes issues when shooting indoors in fluorescent lighting. You would get kind of weird banding, flickering, whatever you want to call it. With this shutter, I was trying it like in my bathroom, lit, shooting directly into a fluorescent light. No issues with banding or anything, even at extremely fast shutter speeds like an 8,000th or a 32,000th of a second. And yes, it goes up to a 32,000th of a second, which I'm never going to use, but that's really cool. So all that combined just kind of blew me away. The fact that it's silent, no issues with flickering. To be honest, I did have issues flickering in one particular place where I was in a restaurant with tons of different LED lights on like LED chains, and there was some issues, and I had to slow it down to a 50th, which is the refresh rate of the electricity, and then it was fine. But that was one case out of already tons of situations I've been in, indoors, outdoors, and I've never had any other issues. So basically, no problems. And I'll also say one last thing about this. It's really cool that there's no mechanical shutter, because that means there's nothing to break in this camera. Because a long time ago, my D3 died, the shutter died. The shutter can't die in this because it's electronic, there's no physical shutter. And last thing, when the camera's off, they did install a protection thingamajigger so that you don't get dust on your sensor when changing lenses. That's cool, and that's an option that you have to turn on. It doesn't come default when you buy the camera. So all that together, I love the shutter mechanism and everything in this camera. Fantastic. So the fourth reason I love the Z9 is the high efficiency RAW, or what commonly people call small RAW. And what this is basically a compression algorithm that they use for the RAW files. So normally you would have like lossless compressed RAW in most cameras, including like the Z6, which means you have the full quality of the RAW. They compress it as much as they can without losing any data. But in this camera, they added this new type of compression algorithm, which is called high efficiency, and high efficiency with a star attached. And those are basically the same, just one is a little more compressed and in theory a little less quality. But here's the kicker. When I compared the most compressed, the medium compressed, and the regular RAW, they all look identical. And when I looked online, other people reviewing this and comparing them, they said they could see a tiny difference, but when they showed the examples, the difference was so small that, again, I couldn't really tell. So I just used the middle one because that's the biggest difference. Basically, a regular RAW file, it's about 45 or so megapixels in this camera, or is it 47, I forget. It gives you about a 50 to 60 megabyte file. When you put the high efficiency RAW with the star, it ends up being about 30 meg. You're shaving almost 50%. That's awesome. So this thing has RAW files. The size of the RAW files is about the same as my Z6, but the resolution is about the same as a Z7. Crazy. And of course, the quality of the RAWs, and the sensor and what it can produce is great. There's the noise performance is very good. The dynamic range is very good. I think on paper, tests have shown that like Z7 is actually a little better, Z6 too. But for me, this is negligible. It's basically the same. The difference is like half a stop at the lower ISOs, and eventually it looks indistinguishable to me. Also, the fact that the ISO goes down to 6400, whereas my Z6 only goes down to 100, well, that's a plus because you get a little more DR on the lower ISO. So again, you get a little more dynamic range overall. Not to mention the RAWs are smaller. That's fantastic. So that's another reason I love this camera. All right, so the fifth reason I love this camera is the ergonomics and just the build, the physical, just aspect of the camera, because it's very familiar to me. It's a lot like my good old D4 and not so much like my recent Z6. Basically, it's got an extremely hefty build, of course. It has an integrated vertical grip. I always use that, and in fact, I find the camera with the grip integrated feels a little smaller than the Z6 with the grip attached. Also, like, super solid build. The Z6, I mean, maybe it's just because I've had it for a while, but when you pick it up, I start to feel a little bit of creaking. You know, like the battery door pops open sometimes if you're not careful. This one is actually quite hard to open. You have to push this thing down and then goes back to open it, so that's really nice. Speaking of the battery compartment, there are 2 CF Express slots. Thank you. I don't want an SD card slot. This like idea of having one SD, one CF Express doesn't do it for me. I like the CF Express and XQD cards. They're faster, more reliable. Transferring from them is better. So for me, this is the way to go. I know it's not for everybody. A lot of people want to have an SD card because a lot of computers have SD card readers. But for me, I love it. This is great. And last but not least, the camera has light up buttons, just like my good old D4 and all the other flagship Nikons. If you flip the power switch to the right, you can't tell right now because it's daytime, but these buttons on the back, all of them are backlit. Now you may think this is like a total first world problem. You're such a fancy lad, you need this feature. Yeah, it is. It's like heated seats in your car or something. Like, you don't need it, but it's a nice to have. And sometimes it's useful. Those of you who watch this channel may remember there was a couple times where I was on a rooftop or something. It was dark and I actually couldn't see the buttons well. I had to kind of, you know, fumble my way through it. So the backlit buttons, super nice. Had them on my D4 and I have them now. And one more thing, since we're talking about like the physical aspect of the camera, also the, you know, the battery. It's nice having just one battery. It lasts well over 1,000 shots. I've gotten it up to 1,500 on a charge. In fact, I've never ran it dry yet. I've gotten it down to like 10%, and then I was, okay, I'll just recharge it. So it never died for me on a session yet. Whereas on the Z6 II with the grip, I have 2 batteries in there. Each lasts for maybe 800 shots. So the total's about the same, but you got to charge them separately. It's all these little things. It's a lot of little stuff that just combines to a better overall camera experience. Even the dials are a little bit more, you know, satisfying to use. Even the fact that there's a dedicated ISO button and a customizable button up here on the other camera, the Z6 with the grip. There's only one button here, so you have to choose what it does. Okay, so the build quality, the physical presence of the camera, I love it. All right, so the 6th thing I love about this camera is the customization. Of course, you can customize your Z6 and Z7 as well, and a lot of other cameras, but this one added some things that I didn't even know I wanted, but now that I have them, I love them so much. So of course you can customize all the controls, and there are more. There's an extra FN3 button on here. You can customize more of the back buttons than you can on the Z6. So that's cool, and what you can put into those buttons is also a little bit expanded. But the thing that really blew me away was the fact that you can also customize the screen modes. So of course, when you hit display on the back of the camera here, like when you're using the screen, it will show you different things, right? And as you press the display, there are like, you know, on most cameras, like 3 or 4 pages of stuff that is displayed there. Now on the Z6, it's just, you're stuck with those 4 pages and it is what it is. Maybe you can turn some of them on and off, I don't know. But in this camera, you definitely can have only 1 page, you can have 4 different pages, and also you can customize what actually appears on those 4 different screens that you can cycle through. Plus, you can independently add some, like for example, when I'm shooting photos, the record button doesn't do anything, so I customized it to turn the spirit level on and off. So I don't need to like go through the display modes, I can just turn the spirit level on and off on any display mode. There's a bunch of other little nitty-gritty things like that I'm not gonna go into, and I love all of them. It just makes the camera be exactly what I need when I need it, and I don't have to mess around with things that I actually don't need or that get in the way. And one last little thing, I use the EVF priority mode, so the screen is not on, but if I flip the screen out, oh, the screen turns on. Simple little thing that the Z6 II and 7 II don't have. You have to change the display mode by using the button on the top of the viewfinder here. I never have to press this button anymore, pretty much for anything. So all those little things about how you actually operate the camera and how you can customize the camera make the shooting experience so much smoother, and I love that about this camera as well. All right, so the 7th thing I love about this camera is the extremely well just fleshed out video modes. Now, of course, many of you probably heard about that. There's a lot of hype about that. And I'm not a big video shooter, you know. I mean, of course we shoot these YouTube videos, and I have shot some stuff for other projects and a little bit for clients. But I'm still, I would say, kind of a novice at video. So I didn't buy this camera for video. I bought it for photography. But it is awesome to have all this power available to me where like it's a full-on pro setup. I mean, okay, maybe it's not fully pro, it's not like a Red or something, but it can do a lot. And I've been experimenting with the RAWs, the N-Logs. I've been shooting a bunch of stuff in H.265, 10-bit in N-Log, and then grading it in post, and I'll probably throw up some of that footage right here, right now. These are just experiments in my neighborhood, and I'm blown away. I'm blown away with the quality, I'm blown away with the AF for video, I'm blown away with the actual results. There are some difficulties with dynamic range, and the noise, the shadows can get a little noisy when shooting on N-Log versus just on full RAW. I'm still figuring these things out, but so far I am just extremely impressed with the video modes. It does an amazing job, and I'm excited to start using it maybe for some more artistic and creative projects about Tokyo. Axel and I, in fact, are discussing possibly making kind of like short films about various neighborhoods. So, of course, we could have done that with our Z50 or Z6 or Z7, but I do get more inspired when I have the best gear. I mean, it just feels better to use the best stuff. So I'm very excited about all the video modes in this camera, all the different like frame rates it can do and all that. It's awesome. So the video as well has me very excited, and it's another reason why I love this camera. All right, guys, so that is everything I had to say about the camera. Of course, we'll do many more videos just shooting with it, but for now, I wanted to talk about these concrete specific things, and it's a lot of stuff to cover, so we just put it in one video. And we did do a video like this about the Z6 back in the day, so this is like a sequel to that. All right, so thank you so much for watching. Of course, any comments, questions, whatever you have, put them below. You probably have things that you know about the camera that I don't even know, because I'm still learning a lot about it. So let me know those things too. I'm happy to get some tips from you guys if you have any. And of course, please check us out on Patreon, support us on there. It does help us out to continue making great content for this channel. All right, thank you so much for watching, and remember, always challenge your eye.